All right, guys. It seems like I've been half a step behind of a lot of guys here on YouTube. I'll pull out some stuff and get ready for a little you know comic review, some of my older stuff and everything. And somebody make a video where they just bought it. They had a huge haul, or they'll do it. Last one was Minutia Minute. Ended up whipping out some of his Green Arrow books, and I didn't you know want to step on his toes in case he reads and decides to do one. There's been a few other things, and then. I got back home uh, not too long ago from being gone on a mini vacation at my mother's house. And so I whipped out a few books after finding out about, here's the spoiler, Batman number 10, that Thomas Wayne was more or less behind the whole Court of Owls, Thomas Wayne Jr., Batman's brother. So, I'm a little familiar with Thomas Wayne Jr. there because he's had three other appearances before, more or less. And that's what I'm going to go over here. But what I'm kind of curious to see is with the new DC 52, I'm kind of wondering if Thomas Wayne Jr.'s first appearance might go up in the pre 52 universe. Um, you know, we had 52 retcon everything, and then we had 0 Hour retcon a few things, and we had the Great Crisis, you know, did the same thing retcon so it's you know it's been retconned quite a few times if they ever mentioned it. The two stories took place and they were never mentioned. So let's get on to this. Thomas Wayne Jr.'s actual. Oh yeah, and what I was going to say about being a half step behind, I pulled these books out and just so that it kind of got me. But on my Facebook, Comics Alliance put up an article. I don't think it was more, sometime today, and I pulled all this stuff out last night to do this video today. So there you go. It was kind of cool to have my facts actually checked according to them before I did this. But, I've got some things to whip out they didn't put out there. They might want to, I think I could if they had the ideas, I could fill in their articles. But anyway, Thomas Wayne Jr.'s actual first appearance is in World's Finest, number 223. Okay. Um, from 1974. And it's a Bob Haney story. Bob Haney to me is an infamous writer because when you read his stuff, some of the stuff is just so out there that it's just wow. I mean, just you'll see. Okay, so basically, the biggest thing that's going on here in World's Finest 223 is that you see that it's a Superman Batman story and Deadman pops in there. The first thing I think is kind of funny is if you don't know what Deadman is and you've read this book, he's yelling, "I don't want your bodies, I want his." So, anyway. So basically, what's going on is that there's a razor boomerang killer. I guess that's what they're calling them, the boomerang killer. But he's using boomerangs, and Jim Gordon and Batman and them, and they're all kind of talking about the case and how can they find the guy. And Deadman pops up, takes over a grave caretaker, grave digger, while Batman's visiting a grave, a Boston brand. Um, for some reason, they have a little talk and everything, and then Clark Kent is sent out to cover the killings. Basically, they're so random, Batman can't figure out what's going on. None of the people seem to really have anything in common. So, you got dead men popping around, and they're finding clues, and they come up with a name, Thomas Willowwood, in this journal. And they kind of talk about it, and they end up going to Willowwood Sanitarium, and they talk to a doctor, and the doctor will not let Batman see any files of anything, but he's a vigilante. It's Batman, so Deadman takes over the doctor's body while Batman reads it and makes a shocking discovery. No, it can't be. Your vigilantes for you. Meanwhile, Superman's doing his own little investigation and he's doing his own thing. And to get on with the story here, you know, Superman knows, Batman knows who the killer is and wants to know why he's not letting him, tell me what you know right now. He was, Batman yells out, the madman is my own brother. Big shocker there. And this is where it kind of gets weird. We get a whole page where we find out that Batman had a brother 3 years older than him. And while the nanny was walking him out, apparently the carriage got away. He was hit by a car. And the doctors determine that he'll grow up to be a criminally insane person. So they send him to Littlewood Sanitarium to be raised and everything, protect himself and, from society. And, those great Gotham doctors, they do so well at Arkham. I really hate to see any kind of mental specialist in Gotham City. So they track down the killer. Deadman takes over Superman. And long story short, once they stop the killer, Deadman, and I'm not clear on this, man. He goes, Batman would say it's okay, so he didn't get permission, but Deadman decides to take over Thomas Wayne's body. As long as the Deadman is in there, it's like Thomas Wayne is asleep and he can't go out being a big serial killer. So Deadman's back in the world. A little interesting tidbit on the history of Deadman you don't hear about. He actually possessed Bruce Wayne's brother's body and lived among us for a while. Now, the other thing that's kind of cool about this, which is ironic with what we know about the Court of Owls, is that this is 1974 and they go ahead and reprint a Deadman story from 1967 with Neal Adams art in it and stuff. What I find interesting is, if you can see that, the big splash page has a bunch of owls on it. Now that's, to me, kind of creepy, with what's going on with Court of Owls. Thomas Wayne's first appearance reprints a story from 1967, and there's a bunch of owls in there. Real interesting stuff, man. I think that's Neal Adams art. I don't want to steer you wrong here. Yep, Neal Adams. There you go. All right, so I don't have a cover to this. So a couple months later in 227, so that's 4 months later, maybe 8 months if this was bi-monthly, but we get a sequel. They finally kind of acknowledge that he's figured out for some reason that Deadman has taken his brother's body and he wants to track him down because he feels like if Deadman leaves that body, Thomas Wayne is going to have that opportunity to be a time bomb and kill somebody. He doesn't feel like, and plus Deadman stole his brother's body, is how he feels about it. So they go on a big, they try to track him down. They're wondering, would Boston Brand Deadman go back to his old acrobatic life? And they try to track him down to there, and there's a character in here which I think is hilarious, the Red Daredevil. Cracks me up. And they just assume that's Deadman, and it's not. The guy's still a criminal, and we get a bunch of airplanes and balloons. Bob Haney, man. I think a lot of Bob Haney stories should have just been in the Haney universe, Earth H. And so we go on and on and on and on. There's a whole story here. I'm not going to go through it too much, but basically what happens is there's just some odd panels in here and stuff. He wants Deadman out of the body, and they have this little they have this little conversation right here. He goes, okay, okay, I can't evade you any longer, old buddy, but I'm not giving up this body till I get my own balloon and beat up Marco. He goes, since you saved my life, I'll give you a little more time, but no tricks, Deadman. You know, just you can have my brother's body for a little bit. So Deadman gets out of the body. Thomas Wayne, oops, jumps in front of Batman so he doesn't get shot and dies. So Thomas Wayne Jr. dies. No, just a weird little story. Okay, so that was the end of that. That was 1975. Okay, Batman does not discuss, according to that interview, that article I read, and me digging through my comics, and I don't recall any Batman stories where we hear about Thomas Wayne Jr. So there was a Thomas Wayne Jr. up until Grant Morrison. I think this was in 2000, maybe. Does what becomes Earth 2, and we have the Owlman. And on this Earth, this used to be Earth 3, but they call it Earth 2 because of all the retcons I mentioned before. We get the Owlman, who is Thomas Wayne Jr., and he survived the mugging, but Bruce died with his parents, and he grew up to be the Owlman. I believe it's it. No, let me back up. I'm doing this one by memory. I haven't read this in a while. Bruce and the mom died in the mugging, and Thomas Wayne survived. I think he became chief of police, and Thomas Wayne Jr. ended up becoming Owlman. Okay, if you follow all that. So he was always there. Now, just a little thing here. Again, I was a step behind. The video where I have Tales from the comic book shop, I'm going blank right now. K&J Hobby Center, where we're telling the ghost stories about the place. I mentioned in there that I kind of thought it would be Owlman, uh, that it would be Thomas Wayne Jr. But I never put it in a video and stuff. But the way I came about that, I was still wrong. I was right about it, them saying it's going to be Thomas Wayne Jr. But they've been talking about the Trinity War coming up as the next big event in the DC 52 universe. So I figured this was a way to kind of start that and sneak in maybe an Earth 3 where we had the criminals and stuff. So, I was in the ballpark. All right. Let's figure that'd be a little bit of fun there, since, they've worked into Court of Owls, all that big owl things, and there's a little history there. Now, the sanitarium that he was in, that I was telling you about, the Comic Book Alliance said that in Batman 702 they snuck it in there in a panel. So they've been probably planning on this for a while. Little clues here and there even before the 52. So that's kind of cool. All right, anyway, guys, thanks for sticking in there. It's a little bit of trivia for you. Ciao.